Mr. Speaker, I have friends that earn over $125,000 a year.
I'm pleased to learn that the Honourable Leader's some of his best friends are people that earn over $125,000 a year. I'm sure that community will feel represented.
8 questions, 8 waffles. I feel like I'm having breakfast.
Welcome to Inside Politics. I'm Chris Varcoe of the Calgary Herald, joined by Don Braid. Don, last week we saw a new legislative session with a new premier, a new government, 70 new MLAs. It seemed like everything has been turned on its head in Alberta politics, and we saw a real proof of that when the legislature sat. What stood out for you in that week? Well,
the tumultuous week, the most radical change in Alberta politics that I've ever seen, and I've been there in and out since 1978. The whole dialogue has changed. Like, you've all of a sudden you got the NDP who said all these things about pipelines, about climate change, and all of a sudden they're the government, and the opposition, rather amusingly, keeps expecting them to be ashamed and to get them to admit that they're New Democrats. They want them to admit they're New Democrats. Right. But meanwhile, not only are the New Democrats, they're proud of the fact they're New Democrats, and they're pushing all of these things that we thought would never really be part of the public agenda. So it's a huge mindset change for everybody in there.
We often talked about in the 90s about the Klein Revolution and things that he brought into place, like slaying the deficit and the flat tax. But we saw the NDP lay waste to several key pieces of that, including getting rid of the flat tax, introducing higher corporate taxes, obviously the progressive income tax system, increasing spending, and getting rid of corporate and union donations. They did a lot in just 3 bills.
They brought in the most radically different, I don't mean politically radical necessarily, radically different agenda than anything since Klein brought in his 1994 budget, the proposal to cut public sector salaries by 5% and all of his massive cuts. This is the biggest change, and a lot of the changes that he brought in as a consequence of the cost cutting, like the flat tax, they're gone now. So it's big changes.
So aside from the new speaker and the new premier, we also had a new opposition leader in Brian Jean. It seemed like everybody was trying to find their footing. What stood out for you in terms of the performances of how they interacted with each other?
Well, I thought Jean didn't have to find his footing. I thought he was very good. He was sure of himself. He's comfortable in the legislature. I mean, he's never been in the position of asking questions before, but after all those years in Ottawa, he's obviously comfortable. In fact, it's kind of small time for him in a way, in this context of how big it is and how imposing it is. So I thought he did very well.
And Notley herself seemed to be at ease in that position.
Sharp as a tack. I mean, she really is very quick, and she managed to get her points across. She can raise the temperature a bit when she's challenged without seeming to be really angry or aggressive. She can be quite funny. There's no question she's going to be good at this.
Well, there was no doubt that the past week showed that everything, it seems, has changed in Alberta politics after 44 years of one government being in place.
No kidding.
Now, let's talk about the week ahead. What should we be watching for?
No more bills. They won't introduce any more because they've done a lot in this first few days, remarkably so. But we are going to see announcements. And if you see how aggressive they've been on certain policy matters already, with announcements on certain things like seniors care and stuff like that, they're going to be announcing regularly, I think, things that will bring up to speed some of the programs, especially in the social area, they think have been lacking. So we'll see a bunch next week, I think.
Okay, the session is back. That means we get to go back to our winners and losers of the week. Don, who is your winner?
Well, I've kind of cited Brian Jean already, so I won't go there for too long. He did well. His party is crisp, clear. They know what they stand for. They're delighted to be going after an NDP government in a way. Loser, well, the PC caucus was almost pathetic, really. Rick McIver saying, yes, we got to keep corporate donations. All my friends earn more than $125,000. They really did come across sounding like the party of the rich. It's got to the point where they just have to stand up and people start laughing in the legislature.
Okay, my losers of the week, I was going to choose 2, and that is I thought Laurie Sigurdsson, the new Labour Minister, stumbled badly when she was asked about the rising EI rates in the province and what the government would do about it. She said, well, we're going to raise the minimum wage. Well, people who are getting unemployment insurance are actually not working, which means that they're not eligible for minimum wage. So I think most people were scratching their heads on that. I think Shannon Phillips also showed a very sort of sharply partisan tone when she was answering questions from David Swan and others about what the government was going to do on flood mitigation. Didn't really give an answer. I think some people maybe were surprised at how quickly she became partisan in the legislature.
Yeah, she became partisan very quickly, which is kind of odd considering the inexperience in the House. And there's lots of booby traps. You really have to watch yourself. But that seems to be her personality. She's like that. There was many obvious examples of real inexperience, like the Minister Ganley falling completely silent when she was asked if donations could be collected retroactively from the last campaign. But that kind of stuff, I mean, they are inexperienced. They know it, they admit it, and eventually they'll be experienced, and if they're good then, I guess they'll be okay.
Talking about experience inside the NDP cabinet, though, Joe Ceci, the finance minister, I thought he had a very good week, and he's my winner of the week because not only did he seem very at ease in answering questions, he sort of harmlessly batted off questions from Manmeet Bhullar about who was going to have to pay more taxes. He said 93% of Albertans are going to pay the same amount of taxes. Only 7% are going to pay more. Yeah. So I thought he seemed to really be able to master the cut and thrust of QP, which maybe shows his experience at City Hall in Calgary. But also, legislatively, he was the guy who just got rid of the flat tax, introduced higher corporate taxes and a progressive income tax system. So in 4 short days, a very good week for the finance minister. So he's my winner.
Yeah. Well, he's got lots of experience and it shows.
All right. Well, stay tuned for week 2.